Okay, we're ready. We'll go. Good evening. My name is Dorothy Malone, Administrative Assistant to Dr. Kelly Clenchy, Superintendent of Schools. It is 6 p.m. on Tuesday evening, August 4th. I'd like to welcome you to the Middle School Parent Forum. Before we begin the meeting, I would like to speak on behalf of the school department, the reason for having this meeting. We arranged a public forum for this evening in the means of presenting our 3 models of learning so that our families have an understanding of what each model entails. After the completion of the forums in each of our schools, we will be administering a 3rd survey to parents that will ask similar questions that were asked on the last survey. This information will be extremely helpful as we continue to look at a number of data sources that will be used to help determine which model of learning will be supported at the beginning of the school year. All school-based task forces have been creative in coming up with safe solutions to be able to educate all the students for the 2021 academic school year. We truly appreciate the tremendous efforts of the educators, parents, and administrators that are members of these task forces. Please note that we will not be using the chat function during this meeting. However, we will give some time for questions using the raise your hand function that are available to you on Zoom. If you called in by phone, push *9, which will also activate the raise your hand function. I will call upon you and as you raise your hands. Once called upon, participants should unmute, state your name, and ask your question. After speaking, please return your microphone back to the muted position. Thank you, and I would like to now turn the meeting over to Middle School Principal Jason Everhart. Jason?
Thank you, Dorothy. Welcome, Littleton Middle School families. It's great to be with you tonight. Hope you're all home safe, no power outages, no downed trees or limbs or anything like that. It's a lot to take time out of your evening to be with us, but it's important for us because we really want to make sure that we have the opportunity to not only involve you in the process, but just sort of give you a sense of our thinking and where we are headed, in terms of creating these plans. And so we're going to shoot for about an hour tonight. I'm hoping that our end of the presentation will take about a half an hour. We'll leave time for questions. Certainly welcome to stay a little over as needed. So there will come a time where we have those questions. But before we get started, I just want to introduce our task force at Littleton Middle School, starting with our new assistant principal, Matt Levangie.
Hey, great to be here.
We have special education teacher, Angie Gresco. We have our Spanish teacher, Amy Tatro, and our 6th grade ELA teacher, Diane Tricana. In attendance as well as our superintendent, Kelly Clenchy, and our curriculum director, Elizabeth Steele. So welcome, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. I want to begin the night just with a thank you to our families. This spring when we were going into this program of remote learning, as you well know, everything was happening as fast as it possibly could. And I wanted to say, first of all, the number of emails that I received and I know our teachers received of encouragement and support and thanks for all the work that we've done really meant a lot to us. And speaking for me specifically, it meant a lot to me as we were going through this process, because one thing that I learned about our community in this time was that people really understood that what we were going through was a crisis and really willing to work with us and see where that road took us. And so as we get ready to head into September, we wanted to, I wanted to let you know that we took the lessons of the spring through a lot of reflection and thought and data collection, conversation with our staff and families, and really kept that at the front of our mind so that whatever plan that we had decided we were going to develop was going to be done with those lessons of the spring and the lessons of the summer brought together as part of this plan. So I just again want to say thank you for the time and the patience and the flexibility. I know it wasn't easy on many of you, and it continues probably not to be easy as we head forth into these days of uncertainty. But hopefully tonight will give you a little bit of a sense of where we're headed, and we can kind of go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to roll out our presentation. As you'll see as we move through this, what we're really trying to focus on is the experience in the school day, whether it's the full remote, a hybrid, or the full entry, the hybrid, or the remote. We decided to handle it from the student perspective, a lot of what that might look like. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the task force, which is composed of parents and teachers and administrators, really did take our guidance from DESE. And we produced 3 models, hoping that when we are ready to go in September, that these models will do really what we want them to do, and that is to meet the needs of our students. So, as you know, we'll introduce an in-person model, a hybrid model, and a remote learning model. For those that have not seen this yet, this is the DESE flow chart with where we really would like to be on the left is to a return without restrictions. Obviously, that's not really possible right now. So you look and see across sections 1, 2, and 3 where that leads us. We don't know right at this time which plan we'll be choosing come September or for September, but you can see where the state has sort of outlined these 3 paths for us. So we want to make sure that we're fully prepared for whatever it is that we have coming up. So let's start with the in-person learning model. And I will encourage my task force to certainly jump in at any point in time if there's something they want to add. So really what we wanted to look at was assuming that we go back to school full time, which we know, given our numbers, where we are, but at some point in time, the idea is that we're going to return to full classes, whether it's the spring or the winter or next year. So what is that going to look like in this post-COVID era? And so student movement was really something that we wanted to look at. Middle school kids, the need to be social is as high as it's ever been in these days. And when we come back in September, kids who have not seen their friends for 6 months are really going to want to be social. So we really took time to think about how do we provide the safeguards that are going to allow kids to experience the joy of coming back into the classroom without the safety concerns that will be associated with it. So here are just a few of the things that we considered. Really looking in terms of movement, lunch. If you ask most of your students, I'm sure many will say that lunch is their favorite part of the day. So how do we effectively and safely get kids into the cafeteria, have their lunch, and return to classes? Well, the answer is we're not going to be able to do that. Under this plan, what we're really looking at is for students to be able to have their lunches in their classroom. So ideally, we would have as many families as possible preparing the lunches for their students before they left for school every day to sort of ease the burden on the cafeteria staff and the delivery of these meals. Logistically speaking, a prepackaged lunch probably makes the most sense to be able to deliver to students. What those options are, and hot, cold, or otherwise, we will certainly work out as the days and weeks happen. But allowing for students to remain in the classroom safely distanced, to be able to eat their lunch, and for cleanup, we are looking at a prepackaged program that will allow us to be able to meet all of those safety concerns. One of the other things that we think about too is bathroom breaks. How do we make sure that students have an opportunity to use the restroom but are using it effectively? So one of the things that we did is looking at a map of the school is to break the hallways down and the bathrooms down by the hallways that they serve. So for example, if you're a 6th grade student in the 6th grade hallway, you're going to use the restroom that's right there. If you are an 8th grade student in the 8th grade hallway, you're going to use the restroom that is down by the gym. If you're a 7th grade student, you're going to use the restroom in the 7th grade. Now, this might seem common sense, but as many of you know, middle schools can sometimes look like the home for little wanderers, students going from hallway to hallway. And so we want to make sure that we are really keeping kids in the hallway that they are. Students in UAs will use the restrooms by the gym if they're in art, health, or phys ed, and they'll use the 6th grade restroom if they are in their computer class or their music class. So how do we keep this safe? We don't have locking doors on our restrooms, so we can't keep students out. So it's really going to be about bathroom checks, frequent and often, making sure that myself and Matt Levangie are in the hallways, making sure that students are using the restrooms responsibly, that they're using them efficiently. And as we get back into the swing of school, one of the things that we'll have to work out with teams is a way of tracking students so that we know who's in the bathroom at any given time. One of the difficulties is you may not have a classroom right across the hallway, so you may not necessarily know. So that's something we'll be working with the teams on, as to how do we track students so that we don't have 3 students in the bathroom at one time or 6 students in the hallway waiting. So as we move forward with this, we will certainly have to ferret that out. And this would be the same that is true in a hybrid model, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Many of these same safety precautions are going to be, you'll find, to be present. We want to build in mask breaks throughout the day. We're going to have at least 3. Right now, we're looking at having 1 during the UA classes, 1 during lunch, and then 1 during a snack period, where students could safely remove their masks outside, ideally, so that they're safely distanced. If the weather is inclement, then maybe finding a place in the school where students can space out well apart from each other, remove the mask, get a little fresh air, and then be able to return to class. One of the big concerns that we have right now is around the hallways. Unlike the elementary schools, we're not necessarily going to be able to keep kids in a cohort, because we offer leveled math classes, because we offer choices in world languages. Being able to keep the kids together as one group is going to be nearly impossible. But myself and Matt Levangie, one of the things that we are committed to this summer as we begin the scheduling process is to do everything we can to keep the groups as together as humanly possible, so that when students do need to move to another group, that the movement is really minimal and the least disruptive in terms of hallway access, but also in terms of access just to other students. We really want to try and keep the kids clustered together as much as we can. The schedule, it will look largely similar to the schedule that we used last year. One of the changes that we implemented was taking the UA block and making it part of a block schedule. So our regular middle school schedule has UA classes that students take 2 days a week. So for example, if you had art, you might have art on Monday and Tuesday afternoon, and then not again until the next Monday, Tuesday afternoon, or Thursday, Friday, or even twice on Wednesday. One of the tasks that we were asked to do was to minimize the number of classes in a day so as to minimize the amount of foot traffic through the hallways at any point in time. And one way to do that would be to block schedule the UAs. So rather than a 45-minute class on Monday and a 45-minute class on Tuesday, by combining those into one 80-minute class, over the course of 5 days, every student would have all 5 of their UAs, but they would have them for 80 minutes. This does a number of things for us. One, it allows the UA teachers the opportunity to really really offer deep, enriching lessons. Because as we know, by the time students get into class and get settled, you've really lost a few minutes of that time. So having that 80-minute block will allow these teachers to really be thoughtful and reflective in their practice and how best to bring their content and make it alive for the students. Students won't miss any of their UAs, and it'll be a completely different experience. One of the things that it does to the schedule, however, is it will stagger the class times. So as the 6th grade UA block, the 7th and the 8th grade UA block hit the 80-minute marks, what it does is it naturally creates a situation where in the hallways at any point in time, aside from the first period and the last period of the day, you'll never have 390 students all in the hallway at the same time trying to get to their next class. You'll always have at least a third of those, and sometimes 2/3, that are in their classes, so that students will have the ability to space out and move freely through the hallways, excuse me, so they're not clustering in stairwells or in front of the cafeteria or in those other places. And that's a real feature of the schedule. I think is really going to help us minimize the amount of foot traffic as well as the proximity that students will be to each other. As I addressed, the idea of keeping kids in cohorts is a concern. It's something that we're going to have to actively work to make sure that we create a schedule that is allowing that to happen, and also to minimize those hallway times is going to become really, really important for us. So as you're looking here, here's basically a sample of a schedule that we might use. It'll look very similar to schedules that we've used in the past. The schedule will rotate. As you'll see on Mondays, classes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 go in order. Then on Tuesday, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. we implemented a rotating schedule a couple of years ago so that students didn't always have the same class at the same type of day. The UA, however, will not rotate. That'll be a solid block across the board to allow for some consistency in the school schedule, the kids' schedule, as well as provide teachers the time they need for planning and coming together. The lunches, as we work this out, we'd like to even maybe make them 30 minutes. I have to tinker with some of the times. In another model, I was able to do so. And that would allow us to be able to have time for cleanup, for times for kids to get their lunches so they can eat at a calm, healthy pace, as opposed to trying to wolf their food down in 10 minutes so they can get everything cleaned up before they move to the next class. So as you can see, they'll have a couple of on-team classes, right, UAs, and then throughout the rest of the day. So the 6th, the 7th, and 8th grade schedules will all look something similar to this. The only thing that would change is that the UA time would change throughout the day depending on the grade level. So if that's the front end of what we're looking at, let's take a look at the back end, the remote model. In our remote model, again, very similar in terms of the schedule, and we'll talk about it in a second, as you just saw with the in-person plan. And that was really the goal, to create that consistency so that no matter what happens, the schedule is the same, whether it's remote, hybrid, or in person. So in that way, as you begin to prepare your students for September, the schedule will largely look the same, and we'll certainly have that out in plenty of time for parents to begin to process this. But obviously with remote learning, we don't have the safety concerns that we do in school. So one of the things that we focused on was really about responsibilities. How do we make this work for everybody in a way that is going to be conducive to getting us the best possible teaching and learning? So we started with the student responsibilities. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that this year, this spring, or different than this spring or any other times, there are some real expectations that we're going to have on our students, our teachers, administrators, and some important questions that we'll have for families as well. So for students, attendance is compulsory in all classes. It's not just ELA and math and then forget the UAs, right? It's not just the classes that you want to attend. It's all of them. In this way, we want to try and make our remote program look and feel as much like the real school day as we possibly can. One of the things that we're really going to ask our teachers to monitor, and one thing that we would really appreciate if parents would begin to help this at home, is that when students are live and with a teacher, to make sure that their faces are visible during live instruction. My wife, other teacher friends who've done live teaching in the spring said that was one of the biggest battles that they fought. Students would log in, they would put on an avatar, and then they wouldn't be seen again for 40 minutes. And so we want to make sure that our students are present, that they're engaged. And so we're going to ask that their faces are shown during that time. We know we have students who say, oh, I'm nervous or I'm embarrassed. The problem is that our educators need to be able to have that contact with students to know that they're not sitting on the couch playing video games or getting a little extra nap in, or to be able to see when students are needing help. And so we're really going to ask students and families to begin that work of getting used to seeing yourself on the screen, of knowing that you're going to be there with your classmates, and that the expectation is that you are visible at all times to your teachers. Another student responsibility is that your Chromebook is charged and you're ready to go, and that your projects and your homework are done in a timely manner. As for the educators, one of the things that we heard more often than not was, can we go back to a homework and grading policy that was similar to pre-COVID expectations? And the answer is yes. We feel like one of the great motivators for students as we get into September is actual homework, actual grading that is just like what we experienced before. So instead of credit, no credit, going back to actual letter grades. When assignments are giving, hard due dates, as opposed to whenever you can get it. While understanding that some kids and some families are still going to be going through situations where maybe the homework can't always get done as timely as it was before, but at least encouraging students and moving them more towards, listen, there is a time limit here for this to get done. One of the things that we'd even begin to look at is pulling back a little bit on the amount of homework and a little bit of a move more towards a project-based learning, so that the work that the kids are doing is meaningful, it's purposeful, and it's applicable to their world and the world around them. And we'll certainly talk more about that as we move closer to the start of the school year. One of the things that we want teachers to do is really have a clearly defined schedule for assignments and homework so that students know what's expected when it comes to that. Families know what's expected. Administrators know what it's expected. We want to make sure that that's possible. And then also really making sure that there's consistent, continued communication with families. One of the things that we heard in the surveys was that many families didn't feel like they'd heard enough from their teachers. And so that's going to be a real point of emphasis for us as we come into September, really increasing that communication. And we'll certainly talk about what that'll look like here in just a second. Oops, let me go backwards. This is not all based just on the student and the teacher. Matt and myself, we're going to have plenty of responsibilities, far more than are listed here. But just as we prepare for September, one of the things that we'd like to do are a series of town hall events, very similar to what we're doing here, but these would be done by grade level, where teachers could attend and we could really talk about content. We could talk about some of the granular things that we may not be able to get to tonight. So that'll be upon Matt and I to really begin to plan those events so that families can ask those questions that really are specific to certain grade levels. We also want to streamline that communication. One of the things that we heard was that some parents were getting bombarded by staff emails, right? 5 or 7 emails a day from a teacher, some from me, and it got to be too much. So we want to look at how do we streamline the communication so that when you do get an email from the school, that it's quickly opened and read, as opposed to just being one more email to fill up your junk mail. So we want to really take time to look at that as we move forward. And then finally, one of the big goals that we're going to have over the next month is how do we create these professional development opportunities for teachers to be able to plan effectively in a new world, whether that's really sort of looking at how can we use remote learning and technology to promote access to learning and student engagement. How do we use block scheduling? How can we use a hybrid model to our advantage? Those are things that we need to begin to look at and we begin discussions around. But as we move closer to September with the larger staff about how to increase our effectiveness when it comes to the lessons that we deliver. We also have some family responsibilities that we'd like to add as well. One of the things that we're really going to need, because our students will not have been in school for 6 months at this point, is to establish routines. And now is a great time to begin that process. Finding a quiet space in the house where a student can do work. If you have it, that would be wonderful. Helping students with their executive functioning to get their materials ready, to have headphones on so that if there are siblings in the house that they can focus and concentrate. One of the big things that I want to address is preparing students to wear their masks for extended periods of time. And I'm sure there are some families that have already done this, but I know there are many who have not. Kids being home largely for the summer, maybe haven't had to wear the masks, but for a few minutes at a shot. We want to work on increasing that duration so that a student can enter Littleton Middle School at 7 o'clock one morning. If that's the case, this should be under the hybrid model, but we'll get to that as well. That the student is able to wear the mask comfortably throughout the day as we move forward. So building that time so that whether it's in a remote model or whether it's a hybrid plan, that students, when we do have kids back in the building, whether it's September or later, that fighting the mask is not the most difficult task that they have throughout the day. So building up that stamina so they can wear the mask for an hour to shot, 2 hours, eventually 5 or 6. So that's one of the big things that we're going to really ask families to help us with, is getting students ready for that process. And one of the things, if we're in a remote model, to begin to prepare as well, are pickup plans for students who may be sick. And we'll get to that certainly in a second. Some of this may seem far off, but these plans, the faster we develop them, the more quickly we can begin to add to them and act on them as the time comes. So for the remote model, the schedule will look largely the same as the full return schedule. You'll see the 80-minute classes for the UAs, time for lunch. The sections will still rotate and will largely follow the school day. so that students are getting into that routine of, all right, it's 7 o'clock, I need to be in school. For sixth graders, this will be a bit of a departure. One of the things that we struggle with every year is getting kids who are used to Russell Street a little bit later start up and excited for a 7 o'clock arrival in our building. So those of you that are sixth grade parents, you're going to have a little bit of an extra lesson to teach kids in terms of their ability to regulate their time, right? Setting that alarm a little bit early and be able to be up and ready to go by 7:20. One of the features of this remote learning model is we built in Flex. Now, for those that are not familiar with our school, Flex Block was a half an hour that we had at the beginning of each day. And the idea was that it was a time for students to be able to finish homework if they were not able to complete it the night before, to get extra help from a teacher, if they had a test to finish or something they wanted to do. What I'd like us to do is to be able to take that time and break it up. One chunk in the morning and one chunk in the afternoon, so that there is guaranteed an opportunity every day, twice a day, for students to be able to have a face-to-face connection with their teachers. The expectation will be that teachers are teaching live, but this will be a non-academic, social, emotional opportunity for teachers and students to be able to connect, to share ideas, to share stories, how things are going, their concerns, their questions. I think it's really important that we have that opportunity built into the schedule, because what we don't want to do is have students who have not been in school 6 months get so caught up in the pace of schooling that we don't take time to really hear from them what their concerns are, what their successes are, and be able to build that. We want our teachers in an opportunity to develop those relationships that are going to carry them through whatever model that we choose. So ideally, we have a morning message to start, we have an afternoon message to finish, so that we can bookend the day so that students are having a non-academic opportunity to connect with an adult in the building, to establish those relationships, and also connect with their peers. So we really are excited about that opportunity as part of our remote model. We'll jump into the hybrid model, and then we'll get into our questions. One of the things that we will really look at is how we divide students. Essentially, we're going to be dividing them into 4 groups, 2 large groups, and then there might be 2 other groups that we'll talk about here in a second. How we do this is going to be interesting because we have choices. For example, in 7th and 8th grade, we have pre-algebra in 7th grade and algebra in 8th grade. Not every student takes that. We have choices between Spanish, Latin, and French. Obviously, students in 7th and 8th grade choose a lane. So how we go to schedule these will be creative. So when we do this is we divide these into groupings. These A and B groups will be based largely on the classes that they will have in their schedule. All students will attend Flex, even if when they're in those remote moments. So if we get into our hybrid schedule, and we'll talk about it in just a second, the expectation is that all students, whether in person or in their Flex or remote, are attending Flex at that time. We want to keep that consistency of connection, of that social emotional development, of the relationships, a part of what we do in whatever model that we choose. So that's one of the expectations that we have as we move forward, that all students will use that Flex option as we get going. We will make every attempt we can to schedule siblings in the same groups. We recognize that this is going to be extremely difficult for families who are trying to get back to work, who are trying to figure out their schedules. We want to make sure that families have the opportunity to have their siblings in whatever grade they are as close to the same as we possibly can. It's something we should be able to do quite easily, but we're really going to have to make sure, given the different classes that are chosen. Again, as I said before, we're going to try and keep students in cohort models as much as we possibly can. There will be some movement, but that's really going to be the work of Matt and I over the summer to create those groupings so that we minimize that movement. How the groups look. So basically we'll have a group A and a group B. Groups A and B will largely be determined by those courses. And we'll certainly talk about that more in an upcoming town hall before the year starts. Group C are for students who may need more, special education students who might need more in-school services than their IEP calls, or in addition to their IEP or services that are there that we just simply aren't always able to meet in a remote model. So we'll have an opportunity for that. And then our group D scheduling will be for those families who choose to go to a remote model, regardless of the school, of the plan that's chosen. So we really did think about all the groups that we have to consider and all the stakeholders as we move forward. So if we look at our schedule, again, it too looks largely like the schedules that you saw in the full return as well as the full remote. The schedules, the UAs all work the same in terms of the order of classes, the 80-minute blocks for UA. One of the things that you'll notice is the big green stripe. This day would be a full remote day for all students so that the building can be cleaned. Students in an A group would attend their classes in the building Monday and Tuesday. Students in B group Thursday, Friday. Wednesday would be all remote for both groups. So the important thing to remember here is that while it is a hybrid, it's still remote in the sense that we're still going to be dealing with students who are at home, who are expected to have their homework ready, expected to be attending classes at a certain time. Those expectations will not change for the hybrid or the remote, but just recognizing that the hybrid is going to have that remote component to it. So what you have here is a real blend between the full return as well as the full remote brought together in one section. So as we move forward with this, I'm sure that you'll have a ton of questions. So at this point, I'll go ahead and throw it back to Dorothy and to our task force team. Anything that I missed that you want to address before we move forward to questioning?
The idea of not using the lockers.
Oh, right. So one of the things that we talked about, thank you, Amy, as an additional protocol was around the use of lockers. It is a time in the morning, if you've ever been in the middle school prior to the start of class, with 390 students, the hallways can get really, really jammed up. And so one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to start off the year by eliminating the use of lockers. Our lockers, they stack one on top of each other. So immediately, if students are using their lockers, we've completely gone past the 3-foot distancing, and kids will tend to cluster in the hallway. So one of the things that we're going to start is by asking that students come to class and go directly to class, not stop at their lockers to drop things off or pick things up. As the weather gets more inclement, we intend to make the locker program part of what we do, but through a training with students and creative scheduling so that students have an opportunity to use their lockers to drop off coats, hats, gloves, boots. But we want to really get kids the focus of coming into the building, staying safe, staying in the classroom when necessary, only moving about the hallways when necessary, and building those habits before we start to add to the craziness of the locker schedule. So it's something that we will bring up as we move forward, but we'd like to start the year without that, just to focus on those routines. Anything else, team, that we forgot? No? Okay, so I see we have quite a few. I think we win. We had a little competition to see who would have the most. I see a 176 on our counter, which is far and above the other schools at this point. So I'll collect my trophy at the end of the evening. All right, Dorothy, if you want to go ahead and start throwing it open, we are ready to go.
Cool. Our first question, Rebecca Lewis, please ask your question.
Hi, so I have an incoming 6th grader, and while I appreciate a lot of this information, I also have to say it's really confusing as someone who has not had a child come to the middle school. Right now, I'm texting my friends asking, I did not know we had to choose languages. So you might want to just have some follow-up where you actually explain. We've never had any introduction to the middle school for a lot of us, which makes it
Rebecca, if I can interrupt, if you'll do me a huge favor, if you'll email me tonight or tomorrow, let's set up a time that we can talk so we can get those classes scheduled for you to at least ease that burden.
So there are choices that incoming 6th graders need to make?
Sixth grade all take the same classes, but if you want to know more about the scheduling, please reach out. I'd be happy to answer any questions. 6th grade, all the classes are the same. They take the same world language, the same music classes, the same everything. So there's not too much to worry about there. It's really for the 7th and 8th grade.
Okay, that's probably the biggest question then. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. One other quick question for remote learning or any kind of hybrid model. Is there any thoughts about access to some of the supports like the guidance counselor? Like
yes. As a matter of fact, Sarah Dorfman, our adjustment counselor, and I have had a number of conversations this summer about really looking at how she sees students. to be honest, Rebecca, knowing that students were not in school for those months in the spring, have been largely contained at home over the summer, we know that come September, we are going to have students who are going to really need an opportunity to really talk about their experiences. And our counselor, Ms. Dorfman, is highly in tune with that. And so we've been looking at different structures so that she's not just working with a single individual student at a time, schedule of the week. There's simply too many students to meet that backlog, won't be good. So we've been discussing different models and how she can run small group sessions where kids can get together in groups, safely distanced, of course, where kids can share their experiences and begin to process some of the things that they have gone through in those ways. But I absolutely share your concern with students having the opportunity to have that outlet. And we are fully committed at Littleton Middle School to providing students an opportunity to meet with our counselors.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Cindy C., please ask your question.
Hi. First, thank you for having this available to us.
No problem.
It's very helpful to start having these questions in a forum kind of way rather than ad hoc social media and texting friends and all. I echo Rebecca Lewis's question around sixth grade orientation as a parent of an incoming sixth grader. So I guess I would just ask about, is there typically a sixth grade orientation session in August for parents? I know when we entered Russell Street, they had those introductory nights just to give you a heads up on how things would change from Shaker Lane to Russell Street. And that might be helpful going into sixth grade for us.
We do have those, and we will continue those.
Okay.
Pre-COVID, we would do something similar where we would invite families into the building 1 or 2 nights in the week or two before school started as an opportunity to ask any and every question you could think about for middle school in Littleton. We will definitely have that again. I mentioned there are our grade level town hall meetings that we're going to have. So that opportunity will certainly present itself again. I encourage everyone who's listening, if you're the parent of an incoming sixth grader, to attend that, because it'll be very informative in terms of what the sixth grade experience will be like. We'll be selecting those dates here shortly. I think right now it's really about taking in all of the data to see which direction we're going to head in September. And then from that, we will further develop our plan. But I make you this promise, we will definitely have an opportunity for families to be able to come together, to ask questions specific to sixth grade, and see how that's going to go. You know, tonight's a little bit different because we're talking about these plans, but we will certainly have that opportunity for those families very shortly.
Okay. And to follow up with another of Rebecca's questions about support and guidance counselor, where I could see a real need is around the executive function skills and having that support and group learning with, again, I'm focused on sixth grade in particular, but where remote learning is such a new experience, and making the observations from the spring, executive function, self-regulation in particular, I could see as a really needed resource for us in the fall. So I just put that plug out there. The last question, well, I have a couple of questions, sorry, relates to your slide around a proposed schedule for remote learning, what a day in the life of remote learning looks like.
Right.
And trying to mirror the in-person as much as possible. I guess my one reaction with that and question for you around that is that you often hear about the Zoom fatigue, if you will, right? Of it's a much different learning style than in person.
Yes.
And have you guys started a conversation around, while it's good to mirror in-person learning, also factoring in having more breaks to counteract or to address that fatigue?
Well, I will tell you, I won't speak for any of the people on our task force. I'll just speak for myself, and I'll speak for my wife, who's an educator as well. that Zoom fatigue is real. It's there. And we are really taking that into consideration. I will tell you, I am now in hour 6 of online meetings just today only.
Right.
So I can empathize, as all of us can, in these moments of staring at a screen, and the focus that it takes to stay present when hour after hour ticks by is extremely difficult for an adult, let alone students who haven't been in school in 6 months. One of the things that we have had discussions around as a task force, but also informally with our teachers, is how do we use our remote time effectively? So Cindy, one of the things that we want to look at is, rather than having a teacher sitting in a Zoom call for 45 minutes talking at students, how do we use that time effectively so that there are opportunities for students to step back from the screen, to look at an actual pen and paper and put something down? How do we work on sharing that? How do we create opportunities for students to work together, even if remote, so that they're not just staring at a screen for 6 hours a day? We are really committed to really looking at teaching and learning and the idea of engagement and how we can change that up. Because I agree with you, if we're in remote for any length of time, kids will burn out, teachers will burn out, and we certainly don't want that. So that's something that we will be having discussions in great length as a task force, greater length as we get ready to head back to the school, and even more so once we're back in school with educators, about how to use that time so that we're not having that screen burnout. It's a real big deal. And if any of the teachers on the panel want to speak to their experiences in the spring and kind of what you're thinking for the fall, you're always welcome to jump in on these questions too.
That's great.
All right.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. And just so you know, when it comes to planning for our 6th grade back to school, I will be sending out an email probably within about 2 weeks, letting everybody know the time, the date, and sort of a rough agenda. So be on the lookout for that. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to email me anytime.
Great. Thank you.
You bet.
Kevin Davis, your question, please.
Hi there. My name is Kevin Davis. I'm at 35 Whitetail. Thank you for holding this event. It's really awesome. And I appreciate the last comment you made about active learning considerations. That's awesome. Zoom fatigue is real. For myself, who have been remote since March, as a computer scientist, I really don't have much Zoom fatigue because that's pretty much what I've been doing for the last 20 some odd years. My real concerning question here is that DESE has said this past week that they're not going to have a rule for contact tracing. But best practices have shown that contact tracing is something that needs to be done as part of managing this whole thing. Successful countries around the world have gone back, and they've gone back with full contact tracing and the like. So I want to ask how God forbid something, somebody, a student or a staff member comes down with COVID, how are we going to get that information out to the individual families that are there if we go in a full back or a hybrid model? And also, how is the school system going to make sure that the siblings that are either in younger grades or higher grades of the exposed person also don't go back to school? Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Kevin. First off, if you have any great tips for how to get past the Zoom burnout, feel free to send those along as well. You said you've conquered that. If you have any great tips, we'll take them, because that'll certainly be helpful as we move forward. In terms of contact tracing, I share your concern. We are in a process right now where we are beginning to if you think of it, filter down the questions and the concerns that we have. And so one of the things that we really are doing is working with our local Board of Health to make sure that if we do have a situation where a student has been diagnosed with COVID, what are those protocols? Because one of the things that you're right that we're seeing is that this information is sort of changing day to day in terms of the numbers of what we know. I just think when I've been watching the news, even just in the last week, the thoughts around whether or not children under 10 are super spreaders and carriers, or they are or they aren't, like it's all that's being called into question. And so it's really important for us as a school and as a district to make sure that we are really working with our community resources. It's making sure that our nurses have had an opportunity to work with doctors and keep up with the latest information. It's about making sure that myself and Mr. Levangie are not only ultimately and immediately aware of what's going on, but also in communication with central office, with other schools, so that these things don't happen in isolation. Because one of the worst things I think that can happen, Kevin, and you addressed this, what happens if there's a concern at Littleton Middle School, but that concern is not shared out amongst the other schools? And I would be negligent in my job if I didn't do that. And so one of the things that I will tell you, while I don't have those fine answers that you're looking for at this point, before if the first student walks in the door, before we launch our first remote lesson, we will have those answers, but it will not be without having a tremendous amount of feedback that we've asked for and pushed for from our community resources to help us in that process.
That's awesome. Has anybody, thank you for that answer. That's really awesome. Has anybody started reaching out? I'm sure you have started reaching out to the Board of Health to see how long it takes from when a positive test result comes back to when the Board of Health, then you get the information so that we know, is it 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day from positive test result to when you get the data?
Kevin, this is Kelly Clenchy here, and I can certainly help answer your questions. The Department of Education guidelines, excuse me, does mention contact tracing. So I did not hear the commissioner's interview short segment of it today, but I'm wondering if it's not being misinterpreted. It's very clear in their guidelines that if we have a positive COVID-19 test, that we work with the Board of Health and do contact tracing. In terms of your other question, we have not received any information in terms of how long it's going to take for test results to return. We're all pushing rapid testing, of course. I mean, the faster we get the results, the more effective we're going to be at controlling COVID-19 if it does enter our community. So that's the information that we have right now. I just wanted to make sure that you understood that we will be employing contact tracing if we have a positive case.
Yes, thank you. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.
Amy Charlo Lewis. No.
I think you mean the stacks.
Oh, the stacks. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought she was next.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm on my iPad, so I wasn't sure about my tech. Again, I want to echo the sentiments of other folks who have expressed their gratitude for the hard work that's gone in. Clearly, countless hours and a lot of sleepless nights, I'm sure, on the parts of folks who are trying to figure out a way to do this. I had a couple of questions, and one of the things I was wondering about was, as we're working through all of this, with multiple kids, some of us in multiple schools, if there's going to be a way to designate a point person, for example, my incoming sixth grader is going to have 5 or 6 different teachers. And if something's going on with us at home or with him, notifying all 6 people, becomes a little burdensome and a little unwieldy on both ends for them to get 6 emails and for me to send 6 emails. And I'm wondering if there's a way to look at the flex teachers and maybe designate that as a point of contact in a more formalized way than has been done in past years for everybody's peace of mind.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, and one that was one of the first things that we had talked about as a task force, and I didn't have it in the slides here, but I'll address it briefly. When when I taught in Cambridge, one of the things that Cambridge Public Schools has in all of their middle school and grade schools are a parent liaison, whose job it is really to be the bridge between the school and the families to be able to answer a lot of those questions and have a lot of that stuff. We had talked about, could we create something similar, either through parent volunteers or even as a staff member to do as something extra, an opportunity that would be that point person so that if there were questions that, you know, myself or Mr. Levangian weren't able to get to because we're dealing with other things, that person's sole job would be to answer those questions and be that point of reference. So we've certainly had that conversation. If we're not able to get, you know, a family liaison off the ground, I think the natural next step would be the flex teacher.
Okay.
You know, your question kind of gets back to something that I kind of hit on a little bit at the beginning, was around streamlining communication. Because if you are getting 7 parent emails a day, that can be a lot. Or if you're getting no parent or no emails a day, that's not enough. Like, we need to be able to find that happy medium where families are getting the information they need, that have the opportunity to answer or ask their questions and get quick, thoughtful responses. And so it was one of the first things that we had talked about, and that the idea of what that looks like is continuing to evolve as we move forward. We'll definitely have something along those lines, and we'll be communicating out who that is and how that's going to work as we move forward.
Thank you. And I think the second thing, and this isn't going to surprise you, Jason, so my apologies up front.
Yeah, go for
As
it.
I look at that schedule that you posted before, all of the blocks, I'm going to go right to start times.
Yep.
You know, the lunch break being 4 hours into the day with then 2 hours of learning post lunch break. I get our challenges around transportation when we're dealing with a hybrid or an in-person learning model. And you sort of touched on it when you said, yeah, you're going to have to, you know, get your kids up and out of bed and sitting at their computer at home at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I just want to sort of reiterate my strong support for, you know, if we look at moving that third block to after lunch, that balances the day a little better. And especially when we're in a remote space, as earlier moms have mentioned, and Kevin talking about Zoom fatigue, to have that block a little bit earlier in the day where they've got a longer break and they can get up and do some movement. For those of us with kids who like to wander around, being tethered to a computer screen all day is really a challenge for us.
Sure.
And we're working on ways to have Ethan be able to be in different positions, like sitting and standing while he's at his desk space, but even still. So I just want to reiterate my strong support for that. And I know that you'll consider it. And then the last thing is, I know you will. And then the last thing is that Connor would like to let you know that if you'd like to consult with him about a very simple system for tracking people going in and out of the bathroom, let us know.
I would love to hear from a former student who has a brilliant idea. So you absolutely have Connor get in contact with me, because I would love nothing more than to be able to say to our families and our teachers that, listen, this was developed by a student, and I think it would be a great opportunity. So Jen, you get that kid on it, and I'm all ears when he's got it ready to present.
It's a deal. He's right here with me. It's a deal. Thanks, Jason.
You bet. In terms of the lunches, one of the things that's possible, and as I said, this is all a draft, and one of the things that's possible, if we were to go to a complete bag lunch delivery system, it could really free up the opportunities that we have to schedule our lunches. Right now, we have lunch times all separated because obviously the cafeteria would be used. But if kids are having lunches in their classes, there's no reason to say that all students couldn't be having lunch at the same time. So keep in mind, Jen, that there are opportunities that as we go into this, we may be able to manipulate the schedule a little bit more than even we had realized. But I want to thank you for bringing that up, because that actually hadn't been in my head until you mentioned it. I was like, oh, we could have 2 lunches at the same time, and that might create some of that ease in the schedule that would allow for some of this. So
yeah, and allow a little bit more creativity, you know, when we're talking about those breaks between classes, and
right,
giving kids a chance to, you know, get up and, you know, walk around the block at their house or something like that if they need to.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things that really sort of, I think, will factor strongly into success and in conquering some of that Zoom fatigue that we're all super concerned about, because we're all doing it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like you said, you're in hour 6 right now. You know, I was spending 6 or 8 hours a day on Zoom meetings in the spring, and it's terrifying to think about our kids having to do that ad nauseum. I guess the only other thing, one last point, is when I look at those schedules, especially when we're looking at the hybrid thing where the kids are coming in 2 days a week, everybody's home on Wednesday, and then, you know, we're flip-flop on the other side. I still remain, very concerned for the faculty and staff that are in the schools, because although students are seeing less exposure to each other, you all are still seeing all 400 students, except for the students who are 100% remote for whatever reason. And that still is very concerning to me. I'm super concerned about the health and welfare of our staff and faculty members in our schools. And so I just want to put that out there. As much as that may make it easier for some families to feel better about things, I'm super concerned about you guys, and I just want to put that out there.
Well, Jen, thank you for saying that, because one of the things that sometimes I think gets lost in the question of what we should do is really around our adult staff. And so thank you for thinking of them. I will definitely pass along your support so that they know that they have you thinking about them as we move forward.
Thanks so much, Jason.
You bet.
Okay, Amy. Your question, Amy? Your microphone is off, my apologies. You're muted.
Sorry,
there you go.
Yep, can I hear you now?
Okay.
Sorry about that. So I have three questions. So my first question is, God forbid we should have teachers that develop COVID or teachers that aren't feeling well and decide to stay home. How are you going to resource all these substitute teachers when you have other districts around us who also pull from the same pool of subs? So I'm wondering, how are you going to resource all these additional staff members when I'm expecting staff members to go out for whatever reason? My second question is, my son is due to have his 3-year IEP evaluation. Mm-hmm. And so if we remote, will you and how you conduct that evaluation? And I'm expecting some of his services to drop, or maybe his IEP to go away. Will you change his schedule amongst all of this other stuff, right?
Sure.
And my third question is, if we are to go partially remote, a hybrid model, will you start off the year, in case that we have to go fully remote, to start teaching and training kids, and not only the technology, but also the etiquette? I think my son particularly found it really kind of stressful and frankly quite annoying when you'd have 20 odd kids yelling into the computer, and it was just you can't understand anything, nothing makes sense, and training kids on the hand raising feature, right, muting kids, and even putting kids in sort of a waiting room until they can just kind of regulate themselves, and then inviting them back into the class so that everyone can hear better. And
right. Well, I'll try and get to all your questions. So let me know if I missed something. First of all, starting off with the substitutes, it's a real concern, because you're right, exactly right. You're going to have school districts all over the area fighting for the same people. So it's one of those things as we move forward, it's really about connecting with the subs that we do have and really providing opportunities to make sure that they know that we are very much interested in their work. It's about taking the staff that we have and really taking a hard look at how we can redeploy some of our staff if that were to be the case. So whether we're in a hybrid model or a full return, are there people in our building that we could use to help cover in these situations? Mr. Matt Levangie and I have not had this conversation, but over the last 3 years, I have substituted in many classes at Littleton Middle School, and to varying degrees of success. I taught a science class last year. I've taught actually a few science classes. We are not even worried about the fact that maybe we have to go in and do this. So when we say reallocate, deploy, sorry, Matt, you're just hearing about this for the first time. We include ourselves in that we will make ourselves available if have to be. So the short answer, without knowing the greater answer, Amy, is that we really have to look at our staff and see students on an IE, state guidelines, those opportunities. Your special education liaison will reach out to you with that time and information. So all that stuff will continue to happen. If a student should drop an IEP or even go on one, we can change the schedule pretty quickly. Matt and I both have a very good grasp of the schedule, and we'll be the ones creating it. So we'll be able to move it around on the dime. So that will be, that'll be the easiest part of my day if I have to switch that schedule around. So it'll really just be more about providing opportunities for you to connect with our special ed staff and get the information that you need. And we are fully committed to having that happen. Angie and Matt, you're certainly welcome to add to that if you want, but it's something that we remain committed to at Littleton Middle School, to make sure that we are doing everything we can for all of our students, not just the majority. We want to make sure that every student has what they need.
All set, Amy?
Okay, and then my third question was sort of if kids can start off the year in a hybrid model, will you be teaching kids sort of the etiquette of being in a Zoom classroom? Again, my son found it really frustrating with all the kids sort of like yelling all at once. It was really chaotic, and he just kind of like shut down, tuned out.
Right. And that it's like walking into a classroom where there's no classroom management, right? If every kid on a Zoom call is being silly, it's going to turn ugly really quickly. So I understand that. The answer is yes. Todd Shoemaker, our computer engineering teacher, will certainly make that a part of his curriculum. I know our individual teachers will certainly have those conversations around that etiquette, expectations for their class. So the goal, and we'll get to it very quickly in the year, is really about developing those habits and those expectations. Because that etiquette, because it was thrust upon students, we never really got a chance to develop what's appropriate. I can tell you right now, our teachers will absolutely take the time to make sure that all students understand what's expected. We'll also have conversations before the year starts as a staff so that we're all on the same page, so that your child is not getting 10 different messages from 10 different teachers. That's going to be really important to us as well, so that we're all using the same language, the same expectations, so that students, as they go from class to class, aren't trying to figure out what teacher A wanted. How is that different than teacher B? So we want to provide that consistency, but we also want our teachers to be a part of that process in helping students develop those things. So that'll be a lot of work that's going to happen in those first couple of weeks, but it's going to be work that's well worth it, because we don't want kids to disengage because other students are being silly online.
All right. Thank you for your questions, for your answers.
You bet. Thank you.
Jason, I just want to alert you, it's 7 o'clock and we have 18 questions left. I'm not sure how you want to move forward.
Let's shoot for 7:30 as the cutoff time, if we can, and if maybe we can wrap it up a little bit earlier, that would be great.
Okay, next question. Cam Swari, your question, please. Cam Swari, you're muted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting this presentation. And I just want to thank you all for your efforts. This is a great presentation. And I want to say hi to Amy Trator. My son was her kindergarten student, and I'm so excited as well. So, like I mentioned, right, my son will be incoming 6th grade student. I share the same concerns like other parents did. And I think every year, right, when the kids move from one school to another, they have, Littleton has a tradition of, kids coming to the school, meeting and looking at, right. Are you guys thinking of providing any virtual settings of kids, meeting their home teacher or anything like that once it's all decided?
Yes, the answer is yes. Right now, we are looking at creating a sort of virtual tour of the building that would be helpful for incoming families. It's even possible, depending on the plan.
I appreciate that tour, just saying.
What's that?
I'd also appreciate that tour being,
Yeah, no kidding. We also, if the situation allows for it, would be happy to have small tours, assuming that we could keep the numbers down and properly spaced, so that people that are, especially if students are particularly anxious about the middle school, that a virtual tour may not quite, scratch that itch. We can certainly have an opportunity for those things. So we intend to continue that tradition, so that students and families will have an opportunity to see what the school looks like, how it operates before the first day.
Okay. My other question is, if we were going to in-process model, would the bus transportation would be the same? Or I heard some districts are doing parents has to pick up, drop off, is there any consideration about that?
I think one of the things that we would ask of all of our families is really to begin, if they have not done so, to really think about their transportation needs. As you know, the state has released guidelines around the buses and how students should be seated, and that staggered seating greatly reduces the number of students that we can put on a bus. So for those families that are able to send their students, are able to bring their students, we would highly encourage that, because it would ease some of the strain on our bus system. One of the things that we'll be doing is working with Safe Routes to Schools. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a program that helps determine the best way for students to get from their home to the school, so that for middle school students who maybe haven't really walked to school or ridden their bike to school, so that we're working with this organization to make sure that there is a way that they can get to and from school safely. But yes, the more families that can arrange for transportation, both dropping off in the morning and picking up in the afternoon, the more to help ease our bus situation. So we're going to really look to families, those that can do that. We hope that they will.
Okay, so I have another question. I lost my chain of thought. Maybe I'll just email it when it comes back. I don't want to hold up the session.
I know how it works. I got you. Come back anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You bet.
Jennifer Kane, your question, please.
Hi, just reiterating, thank you guys so much. This is really quite helpful. My question is specific to the hybrid model. Mm-hmm. Really looking to see what the flexibility is, especially around, I'm going to have if I choose the hybrid model, I'm going to have a really, really low tolerance for deciding, you know what, my son, has one or two symptoms. I'm not taking any chances in sending him into school. I want to do that. I want that to be, something that's encouraged. But obviously, if I'm doing that every time that he has a cough or something like that, if we were, last year, gosh, he'd have a ton of absences. So, is there an option that, if he's supposed to be in the classroom that day, and he's got some symptoms and I'm just not feeling that he should be in class, that he would be able to be remote that day. And maybe, he's totally fine. It was just allergies. But, is there going to be that kind of a flexibility for someone to be remote, depending on symptoms or anything else like that?
Well, first of all, Jennifer, I want to thank you for your consideration, because that's really important. And it's something that we're certainly going to encourage all families, to really take a look at their students as they leave in the morning. And if a student is showing those symptoms, to, that idea of discretion, or not discretion, but of being overcautious is going to be really helpful in us being able to maintain whatever program that we move forward with. So I just want to thank you for considering that. Keeping the child at home if that is the case. The answer to your question is yes. We are going to make sure that no student gets left behind because they are experiencing symptoms that may or may not be COVID related. The real question is how do we pivot within that week so that a student who was supposed to be in the building one day isn't able to. So we still have some little quirks and kinks to work out as we move forward, and we will. But the answer to your question is yes. If your child is showing those symptoms and you want to keep them home for safety reasons, please do so. We will figure out on our end how to make that work. As long as, the one thing we ask is that you just call the school and let us know so that we know that the child will be in attendance live from home, but will be in attendance. And the rest of it, we're going to make sure that nobody gets left out of that.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that's really important for parents really to consider, and that's how we'll keep the school as healthy as possible.
Well, absolutely. And thank you for bringing it up, because it's a great question. And it really does. It gets to the sustainability of the models that we're creating, right? If everybody's pulling together, right, once those symptoms come up, and they will, right? And they may not be COVID related. It's going to make for a healthier school. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
And how about the rigidity in choices? You know, if we are, you know, I know that everyone has an option to be fully remote. And let's say school decides, you know what, let's go fully, you know, let's do hybrid. And that's basically the general choice, but some families do get to choose to be fully remote for whatever reasons. Can we switch back and forth? Like if we're in the school at the beginning and then we're just like, you know what, we're not comfortable, it is not working, the consistency is not working, whatever, switch to fully remote, and vice versa, start out going, you know what, I'm not comfortable being in the school, but wow, they really seem to have it all together. Can we switch back into
Sure.
hybrid?
No, it's also an excellent question, and one that we've been talking about as we've gotten a little further down the rabbit hole with our plans. The short answer is that we want families to have that flexibility should they feel the need for safety reasons they want to keep students at home. But you know, the flip side is that as administrator in a school, changing schedules frequently for students and asking teachers to have constantly changing class rosters can be difficult. And so one of the things that we'll discuss specifically around students moving in and out of models is, you know, if you were to pick a lane, how long should you be expected to stay in that lane? Some districts, I know Lexington, in something they put out recently, said you had to choose that lane for the year. So if you chose a full remote, you were in it for the year. We're looking at the first trimester as being sort of that place, so that if a family chose that they wanted to go remote because they, you know, for safety reasons, we would ask them that they stay that till the end of the first trimester. So to give teachers an opportunity to develop those routines, students the opportunity to develop those routines, and also for us to see how this thing plays out, because who knows if numbers rise or numbers drop, what those decisions might be at the state and local level. So we would ask that families that do decide if they were going to go full remote, that they think about it in terms of trimesters as opposed to week or month to month.
Okay, thank you very much. That's really helpful. When do you know when we'll have to make those decisions by for this upcoming year?
In terms of choosing a path, I think the first thing in front of us is really deciding what the model is going to be, and that'll come through a survey that's going to come out later this week. It'll be through current conversations with school committee. So I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, Jennifer. So I don't want to make a promise that I can't keep, but we're hoping to get that information out and opportunities for those parents much sooner rather than later, because to be honest, Matt and I are the ones that have to schedule it. And we really don't want to be pulling an all-nighter the night before school starts trying to get this done. So the faster we can get this information out and collected, the easier it's going to be on us. So there's our own self-interest in it as well. So I make you that promise. We're going to be as quick as we can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Kate Grant, your question, please.
Hi, thank you so much for providing this forum for us and this presentation. It's really very informative, like others have said. I especially am very appreciative of the grade level town hall events that you said you're prepping for families for September. So that's great. Thank you so much. I, along with others that have spoken already, like Cindy and Jen Stack, about the remote and hybrid plans, where the remote part of the hybrid plan, where the blocks are back to back the way they are. So I can understand that when you're in person, there's sort of like built-in breaks between a section 1 and a section 2, because you're going to get up and probably move classrooms, or at least that's my assumption.
Right.
But if you're remote, like there's not that built-in break. So I just wanted sort of to reiterate what Cindy, I think, and Jen Stack were saying about.
Sure.
I'm hoping that it sounds like you are being very mindful of trying to sort of build in breaks. And so I just wanted to reiterate that concern.
Well, before you go on, Kate, I just want to, the lights are flickering in my house and I'm watching the wind outside. So if I go dark, it's because we've lost power. I just want you to know that they're just flashing on and off. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. So don't think I'm rude if I disappear.
Okay.
Maybe that'll give me an opportunity to address that concern you have, Kate. I think it's a concern that we all feel. I'm a glass full kind of guy. And I think the positive that maybe came out of the spring is that a lot of teachers learned what didn't work with remote learning. And just sort of having lecturing classes, you know, is not the way to go. And that's not the way that kids are going to respond. And, you know, we're extremely lucky. Oh, now it's making noises at my house. All right, hold on. But I think we've got a great staff, and I think, you know, talking to the teachers that I have, like, they're ready to go. They're ready to look at things in a different way and reimagine how they're going to teach kids, and they understand the importance of engaging kids at this time. So I think for me, it's, you know, all that work or all those missteps we may have had in the spring are going to pave the way for, I think, how we change not only how, you know, we view this model now, but how we view teaching going forward. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity for all of us to sort of reimagine, because everyone has that in mind. Don't forget that the teachers now are going to have to be in this same model, and they're going to understand that fatigue too. So I think they understand that relationship. And, you know, the great thing is our staff has been teaching this age group for a long time, a lot of them. And so they get that. And this is just another challenge for them to rise to.
Great.
One of the things, Kate, that I'm excited about is I had a conversation with a teacher a few weeks ago, and she was like, you know what, the remote learning was not the most fun. There were lots of it I didn't enjoy, but she goes, regardless of where we start off in September, she goes, there are things that I am going to take from remote learning, and I am going to embed them in my teaching and learning, whether we're remote, full return, or otherwise. And she was so enthusiastic about it. I still get a smile about it, because I know our educators have looked and thought, wow, you know what, this is just great teaching, this thing that I did today, and I'm gonna make it a part of what we do. So I think one of the few silver linings in these situations is, like Matt talked about, finding a way to be half full on this and really look for the good that can come out of it. And I know that our teachers are really going to figure out what worked well and continue to improve and build on that to create a real special experience for our students.
Great. I had two other questions. One was about the presentation I looked at from the school committee meeting had said that if we were in a remote schedule, there'd be 4 85-minute classes per day. But obviously that does not look like the schedule that you presented today. So I'm just making sure that we wouldn't be going back to the 4 85-minute classes.
No. That was, again, these are rough drafts, and they're where we are, kind of the state of the middle school thinking. You know, it's funny, we put together something and then you think, okay, this is great. And then you start to scratch the surface and realize, you know what, maybe this isn't as great as we thought it was, but you know what, it doesn't fit this need. And that was the case with that schedule. We realized pretty quickly, you know what, it doesn't meet the needs of every student. And so we went back to the drawing board. So nope, we're not going back to that.
Great. And then my last question was about, in your presentation, it said that every attempt will be made to schedule siblings into same cohort groups.
Yep.
And maybe I misunderstood yesterday's presentation about Russell Street, but she seemed to talk about, like Ms. Temple said, that like students within Russell Street would be scheduled in the same cohort groups. But is it true that if I have a student at Russell Street and I have a student at Littleton Middle School, that they would be in same cohort groups, or not necessarily?
The answer is not necessarily, and only because, like, Cheryl and I have to really sit down and think about, like, what might that look like, right? And all the principles. And we just haven't really gotten to that point yet. We've had discussions around, you know, is this something that we should offer? What would we be getting ourselves into if we made that offer? How reasonable would it be to be able to schedule like that? And so there's a lot to consider. So we have not shut the door on any of that. I just don't want to make you a promise that we'll be able to accommodate families school to school when we may not be able to in every case.
Okay, great. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Jason, we have 13 questions left. Can I make a suggestion that we try and barrel through if everybody would just keep it limited to one question each?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Shannon, please. Oh, nope. I guess I put the wrong person.
I think it's me.
Okay, that's fine. Shannon will be next. Thank you.
Hi. I'm just looking for some clarification around the cohorts. For example, I know we're trying to limit exposure with all the kids. So for example, if Katie and Liz were in Flexbox together, Are they then together for math and language arts? Are they together all day, the kids?
It depends. So speaking as a whole school, we could largely do the 6th grade by cohorts because they have the same classes. The 7th and 8th grade get to be the challenge because if a student has pre-algebra in 7th grade, if one student has it and the sibling doesn't, right, then obviously we're not going to be able to do that. And there's kind of the ripple effect that comes from there. Same with music. We have for 3 different music classes. So once you get into 7th and 8th grade, that becomes a little bit more difficult to do, where it's a little bit easier in the 6th grade. So the goal would be to do that. One of the things that Matt and I will have to do is really reach out to families because we have students who are siblings, but maybe they don't have the same name as a family member, right? So we're going to have to reach out to find out who these students are and how we can best accommodate that if that's the case, especially if the siblings are in different grades. So to answer your question, the answer is yes, they could be in every class, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that case. And sometimes parents will say, listen, I don't want my kids together. They need a break from each other. And
yeah, so I'm sorry, just to interrupt. I don't actually mean like siblings. I mean like, I mean just like thinking about having to limit exposure. And you guys have a very challenging job to do that as middle schoolers because they change classes so often. I guess my question is more just like, are they going to be in the same classes with the same kids all day long, or are they going to be switching out and exposing to many different kids throughout the day? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. There's no short answer to that question. We are going to try to keep kids together as much as we possibly can. Unfortunately, the realities of the middle school schedule don't allow us to keep kids together in the same room all day long with the same kids. That would be ideal in terms of safety. We just, unfortunately, unless we want to de-level math, which will get me thrown out of Littleton if I were to drop that, there's just no way to be able to do that at this time. So we're gonna really make an attempt. So what we might do, so for example, is we might look at 8th grade algebra and say, okay, of all the kids that are taking 8th grade algebra, how many are taking Latin? All right, so let's put those kids together. How many are taking Spanish? And begin to think of it like that so that we're kind of working at it from different angles so that they are in as few situations with movement as possible. We won't be able to get it down to 0 for all kids, but we're going to make every attempt.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
You bet.
Shannon, your question, please. Shannon, you're muted. Shannon, you're muted. There you go. Are you there, Shannon? I'll come back to you, Shannon, if needed. Sashi? Sashi?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I think one of the parent already asked, but I'll try to make a follow-up question on that. If we pick up one of those 3 modes, I guess one of the 2 modes, remote versus hybrid, what is the criteria to switch between the 2 modes? It could be based on a vaccine availability or something changes for the parents. Right now, some parents can work remotely. That allows them flexibility for having your kids for a remote learning. Once that flexibility is gone, you have to make an adjustment irrespective of whether you have a vaccine or not.
Right.
And the other scenario would be, God forbid again, if the situation gets worse, how do we switch back the hybrid, all the hybrid kids into remote learning? Do we have any plans, any thoughts into that scenarios?
So, that's certainly something that we deal with at the administrative level and at the district. When we begin to look at these numbers, we have been looking at these numbers, but as we continue to do so, one of the things that we'll look at are the rates of infection. Are they staying low? Or are they increasing? Are they increasing in our community versus others? No idea gets made in a vacuum. I want you to know that there's no just a single person that decides for the district. It'll certainly be something that we discuss. It'll be in the best interest of our families and our students and our staff. But sometimes these decisions might have to be made quickly, right? As you well know, the data and information can change rapidly. And so that's back to the communication, the rapid communication, being able to work and talk between schools and central office to be able to determine that. The schedule, in terms of the students, their schedule and their classmates would stay the same whether they were in full, hybrid, or remote. So in that way, the consistency for the students will be the same. If today we're in hybrid and tomorrow we're in remote, they're not going to receive a whole new schedule, right, with whole new classmates. So for the students, the consistency is there. We will just have to make the decisions, with our community members as well, like the Board of Health and school committee and everybody else, right, to move back and forth between those mods. But for the students at the middle school, their experience will be pretty consistent throughout.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Julie Anderson, I'm going to promote you to panelist. You can shut your camera off. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I didn't want my face to be shown. I don't have any makeup on. Okay.
That's all right.
Quick question. So was there any talk about having a later start time in the morning? I know somebody was asking that at the school committee meeting.
Right. We've had that discussion a lot. I can't really tell you how far down the road we are. Like, I'll be honest, I'm fairly new in this position to know like the scope of what it would take to change the start times. I do know that many parents have talked about it and asked about it. It's something we continue to discuss at the district level. There are a lot more factors than even I realize when it comes to something like that. So I can't give you an answer in terms of progress. I can tell you, though, it continues to be something we discuss and something I'm sure we'll continue to discuss as we move forward.
I was thinking mainly as a remote model, because I know for busing, that's a big issue with all the other schools, right. But I don't know, just something to think about.
And that's one of the things that we tried to sort of think about, like, if we were the parents, what would we want? So there are parents who say, no, well, listen, my kid at 7:20 is not going to be out of bed and doing work. There are other parents who say, no, I want them up and out of bed doing work, because that's when we come back to school, that's going to be the schedule. So the more closely we can make the schedule fit the school.
Right.
This is one of those, like it's almost a coin flip in terms of the percentages that would be in favor and against. And so it's something we continue to discuss. I don't have that great answer for you right now, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.
Toombs family, please ask your question.
Hi, this is Rob Toombs, and here with Tracy and Megan's our daughter in middle school, and the question we had was, are there going to be parent-teacher conferences throughout the year, just like we did when we were live at the school?
The short answer, yes. One of the pieces of feedback that we got time and time again at the middle school was that not having the spring conferences many parents felt disconnected from the school because they didn't get a chance to really meet with teachers, find out how the students were doing, get to know about progress. So among the many lessons we learned was, one, make sure that we find a way to bring those conferences into be. So the answer is yes, we will absolutely have them.
Thank you.
You bet.
Lori, please ask your question.
Hi, this is not Lori, but I will speak on her behalf. Jason, first of all, thank you. And thank you to the staff and certainly the parent volunteers that have put all this together. Appreciate all the effort.
Yeah.
My comment and question has to do specifically with the hybrid model and kind of the learning experience. If we take a lesson from industry where companies have moved from a single site to multi-site, where they now have to move to teleconferences and video conferences, there's certainly lots of challenges associated with moving to that model where people who are in the room are able to participate in the conversation. It's much harder for people who are on the line or on video to participate or feel like they're part of the conversation. And I'm certainly worried about the model as we go forward of that happening, particularly as teachers, of course, are not taught and trained to do teaching in this manner. So I'm sure there's professional development that you're planning to do, but what what thinking has gone into kind of operating in this model and really changing the way the kids are really learning in this hybrid approach?
Yeah, my lights are really going now. I think, one of the things that we're really looking about, something that Matt had said earlier about looking at the glass half full. This is a real opportunity for us to really talk about what is effective teaching and learning. What does student engagement really look like? And so to answer your question, it's really going to be about having discussions with teachers around different models. So for example, there are, plenty of teachers nationwide who have a very traditional way of teaching, right? I present the lesson, you do the work, you do the homework, turn it in, and we do the next thing. What we want to do is really begin to look at how do we break down those walls and really start to look at something. If this is the lot that we're in, right? How do we make this work for us? So for example, one of the things that I think is very effective in situations like this is something called the flipped classroom. I don't know if you're familiar with that, where the students do a lot of the traditional work at home that you might get in the classroom and then use class time for discussion. So it's not passive learning, it's actually very active. We want to move from traditional, worksheet packets and read alouds to project-based learning, where kids are forced to apply their knowledge rather than just memorizing and regurgitating facts and information. So those are two models of many that we're going to begin to work with our staff on. Some are already there and doing it. We're really going to look to peer-to-peer opportunities, professional learning communities where teachers can say, hey, listen, I use Screencastify a lot in my classes. I'm going to run a PLC for those who maybe have not done it. Come join me. So that it's not Matt and I top down telling people, but rather giving teachers the opportunity to learn from themselves, but with the expectation that everybody is doing something different than they were before. It's a crisis, but it's also an opportunity. And my expectation, and I know Matt's will be too, that our teachers are trying something new. I would rather them try and fail than just stick with what they've known for years because it's easy. And that's how we're going to approach teaching and learning this fall.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Jason.
You bet.
Shannon, you're back on. Your question, please. And Shannon, you're muted. There you go. I don't know. Shannon, you there? Now we'll move on again. Crystal Dion, please.
Hi, I have a question about the remote learning for kids on IEP. I love the hybrid model where our IEP kids are in school learning, where for mine, she really, really needs to be. So what is the plan for kids on IEPs for remote learning?
So the plan is that our students in remote learning, every student in IEP is getting the education that they have the right to, the education that we have come to provide in Littleton, the education that you should expect from us. All of that will continue. The format might change, but the opportunities for students to meet with their special education teachers will be there. The opportunities for students to get that skill-based work in, to get whether it's speech and language, whether it's occupational therapy, whatever the needs might be, our full intent and our guiding light in all this is to continue to provide those services as much as we can remotely as we would expect to do if we were in person. What will remain to be seen as we move forward and the numbers and the plans change, right? What that might look like. But I just want you to know, Crystal, that no student is going to not have their needs met at Littleton Middle School. We're going to make sure that everybody has exactly what they need.
Does that include differentiation of assignments done by the staff?
The expectation for our teachers is that they are looking at the work. So for example, if there's an assignment given, the teacher should be making those initial modifications, working with the special education teachers around that those modifications, those accommodations, how to scaffold them appropriately so that students are able to complete the work and be able to be a part of the classroom discussions and activities. So the answer to your question is yes. we will continue to do that work as we move forward.
Okay, and just the question related to it, if Littleton decides to go remote, is there a plan to try to still get IEP kids in the building, or would it be across the board, everybody's remote if that's what Littleton decides?
We spoke about that as a task force this morning. Again, Matt, Angie, feel free to jump in. The state regulations, I feel like, have changed even in the last few weeks. Originally it was no, and then yes, and maybe. So it gets down to the case-by-case basis of it. If there are students whose needs must be met in the building, then we're gonna find a way. If it's one of those situations where we can't, then we're gonna figure out what's the best possible solution that we can provide. Unfortunately, Crystal, I don't have a flat answer that fits all scenarios. It really is going to be based on the individual IEP, the individual student and family, and what we can do to best serve that. So all I can offer you is a commitment to work with you and to make sure that those things do happen as needed.
Okay, your time and all of everybody's efforts are greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie, your question, please.
Hi, thanks, Dorothy, and thanks, Jason, for holding this call tonight. I had a question similar to Dan's with respect to using technologies to make remote learning engaging and fun and participative.
Right.
And it's around the 10 additional staff development days that have been provided. How are those days being used, and when will they be taken? And is it for enhancing remote learning?
So we are going to use those days. Most of them we use before the school year starts. The latest date that we can start school is the 16th. So we're going to use as many of those days as we can before. The answer is to the last question is yes. The expectation that we have for these days, I won't speak for the other schools or for the district, but I'll speak just for the middle school, is that those days, Julie, are being used to take the model that we're in, whatever that decision is, the content that you have to deliver, and figure out how are you going to best deliver this information in a way that engages students, invests them in what's going on, and keeps them coming back to class again and again and again. That's my expectation and Matt's expectation for how we use these days. Some of those days will be used at the district level, I'm sure, to have broad district discussions. Some of them will be used at the school level to have school level discussions specific to middle school kids in our plan. And then others will be more individual or team based. So it'll likely be a broad range, but all of it is designed so that nobody starts off in September, assuming, like you said, remote, going, well, I don't know how to do this. I've never done it. We want our teachers to be ready, chomping at the bit for remote, if that's the plan, because they're so well prepared. That's the goal and the expectation.
All right, thank you very much. Good luck, and thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Dorothy, I don't know how many more questions we have. I don't want to keep our teachers.
No, we have Shannon again, we'll try. And we'll do Swathi at this time, and then we have one more as a repeat question, so it can be very quick.
Okay.
Swathi, your question, please.
Hi. Well, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation, and it's really useful. I just have one quick question. I don't want to waste much time, but you might have already addressed this question. What if we chose the remote option? So my understanding is my child would be going fully online for the first trimester, and if everything changes after 3 months, can we switch back to in-person classes?
So if you're assuming, let's say we're in a hybrid model to start as a district and you wanted to choose remote, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, we ideally, that's the way it will be constructed, is that at a certain point, whatever that is, likely at the end of the first trimester, that we have an opportunity for students who have chosen remote to re-engage in the in-person learning part of the hybrid model. That's the intent. And I don't think there should be a problem being able to achieve that.
Okay.
Some of it might just be scheduling and class size, but we will certainly look at that as we move forward, but that shouldn't be a problem.
So that means if the district decides to go fully hybrid, then we still have the flexibility to go fully remote for the first 3 months.
Right. We want families to feel comfortable, but one of the things that we need as a school is, well, we don't want our families flip-flopping back and forth week to week. So as long as there's that understanding that we want families to have the flexibility they need, but we need the school to have the same consistency. So we're not here to make any mandates or ultimatums at this point. What we want to try and do is create an opportunity where parents can choose the best path for their child as needed, but also keeping the school's needs in mind and our ability to be able to deliver that education effectively.
Thanks a lot. Thanks so much for everyone.
Not a problem. You're welcome.
Okay, Shannon, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Yay, Shannon, all right.
I'm so sorry, everybody. Talking about
all right.
the technically challenged.
That's all right.
So yeah, my question is, so I am a nurse. I work at Emerson Hospital, and I'm very sort of focused on COVID testing right now. Is there any thoughts of COVID testing for all the children at some point before we start school? Any kind of plan for that or thoughts about that? I don't know how well it would go over, but just any talk around that subject?
Well, I don't want to speak above my pay grade, but I guess what I will say is that's where we work closely with the Board of Health to make sure that we have the most current information and communication as we possibly can. Mandating student testing across the board, that's a conversation, a much deeper conversation for another time. I can totally see where you're coming from. You think of like in professional sports with teams playing in the bubble. If you knew everybody was COVID free, it would certainly help with a lot of the fears and concerns.
Right.
I'm not able at this point or prepared to tell you that we're going to do something like that. We're just going to have to keep working with our community resources to see what's the best and right next step.
Okay.
I wish I had a better answer for you.
That's okay. It's just a thought that keeps coming to mind.
I understand.
That baseline, and where so many kids are asymptomatic, that may really be the case for
Right.
a lot of children. So,
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you for trying to answer, and thank you everybody for holding this meeting.
Not a problem. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Julie, your question, please. Julie? You're muted. There you go.
I don't have a question. Sorry. If it's me, I don't have a question.
Okay, thank you. Eileen?
Is this our last question?
Last
Julie?
question. Yes.
Okay.
Hey there. First, I want to say thank you to everyone in the district for the work they did during the crisis teaching that happened over the spring. Going forward, I have a number of questions that I'm going to try to wrap into one.
Right.
First and foremost, part of that has to do with when we're looking at a schedule and the kids are in classes and 50-minute classes, and we know there's a 9-to-2 ratio that you can take in information for about 9 minutes before you need to process it. How are we going to break kids down into groups when they're online to have small breakout sessions and let them get in there? But then on top of that, how are we going to let parents with SPED kids come in there and possibly amend their IEPs to change the services, because the way we're servicing kids is changing.
Right.
On top of that, I want to know when we're going to do map testing, and how soon parents can get results on how much learning loss has happened and how we can make up for that. What happens with remote session in the hybrid scenario if we're in that and there's a bunch of Monday or Tuesday holidays and there's a bunch of loss because certain kids won't be there on certain days. Again, the breakout rooms, small groups, polling, getting kids more interactive with it. And then what happens with the contract tracing? I know we're asking people to commit to something for a semester, whether it be remote, hybrid, or in person, or whatever it is. We're asking parents to commit to one thing. How can it seamlessly shift if all of a sudden you find out that I'll take my kid. Charlie's in a class and he moves over here and he interacts with 20 other kids and he's possibly infected 5 teachers. What does the school do? not that he's going to do that. He's a pretty good egg.
Yeah, you just outlined my worst nightmare, Eileen. Thank you. I'm going to be thinking about it all night.
That's what I'm here for.
Yes, it was a very dense single question, so I'll do my best to get to the parts of it. In terms of The scheduling and the seamlessly moving back and forth. That's where the consistency between the schedules, between the expectations really goes into play. That's going to have to be the bedrock upon which all the rest of this is built. You mentioned the 9-to-2 ratio. That's a little bit of what we talked about earlier with helping support our educators in finding new and different and in some cases better ways of engaging students remotely, because this is going to be a little bit different. We don't know what was lost from the spring because we didn't have the MAP testing. So MAP testing we are committed to and will continue, and that information will certainly be sent home. With a little bit of a later start. I don't have a date in mind just yet, but we'll be planning that out before too long. But it's something that we as a district will want to know too, because it's going to inform our instruction. It's going to inform our decisions around curriculum as we move forward. So not only will the families be interested in knowing if there was loss and how much, but so will we, because
it's going to impact us for years.
Well, that's what I was getting to is, we could be talking about a 5-10 year kind of cycle that it's going to take for kids to really get back in, to normal. So we want to make sure that we don't miss an opportunity to really get a sense of where the landscape is. So we fully intend to continue with those tests and the data collection and the analysis to make sure that we are current with where students are and then can adjust accordingly. So that's kind of where we're at. I think there were a couple parts of your question that I didn't get to. You can certainly ask it again if you need.
I guess, the parts of my questions that I'm and I know I have a lot of questions. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
My kid's going into sixth grade too, so this is all kind of new. I love the idea of having the sixth grade parents come in at some point. But how do we deal with that contact tracing if schools all of a sudden have to seamlessly shift, and then how are we going to change possibly sped services, like what we thought at the beginning of last year going into, say, like an IEP evaluation? We thought we were going to need A, B, and C, and now it looks like as a parent, I need a lot more support in, C, D, and F over here because it's not the same. It's going to look different. And, that's our reality. It's just, there's nothing we can do about it, but how do we shift those services?
So that's where, I've heard something about leadership, and I've heard a quote that says, as leader, you should be the dumbest person in the room. Right. And I feel that way when it comes to certain things, because I'm going to tell you right now, Eileen, I have special education teachers who I trust 100% that they are going to meet that need and that they are going to do what they can. I'm going to owe them a lot of steak dinners, I think, as the weeks and months go on, because they're
already do.
Yeah, I know I already do. On top of it, because they're going to be doing the kind of work that is so much more in depth and so much more layered than I think most people realize, even that I realize.
Sure.
And so I'm gonna lean heavily on my staff to do that part of it, but at the same time, working with them so that we are working as a school to make sure that students get the services they need. That when it comes to those evaluations, the testing, a change in services, that those things that we are able to be nimble enough to respond quickly, but not so much so that we are overreacting, right? Trying to find that happy medium. And so this will be a test for us too, as we move forward and what this looks like. And so thankfully, because I have such good special education teachers, they're going to be really helpful in their ideas and thoughts about how we can creatively and effectively still meet those needs. So while I don't have those intricate little details for you, by the time we sit down and have our fall forum or our grade level forums or town halls, we certainly will.
Jason, can I just sort of help address that?
Sure, please.
Just to let parents and guardians of students who receive special education services know that you will have a liaison that will reach out to you at the beginning of the school year. And we recognize that you're going to have many questions, and we will be there to help you navigate this new way of learning for our students. So I just wanted to put that out there. And we hope to have some sort of format where we can help to answer those questions, even maybe prior to. We may not be able to answer individual questions, but at least give you some idea of what the school year will look like for your students.
do we know what the school's using for the online servicing? Like, are you sticking with Google Suite, or are you going to Zoom, or what are we using and how are we using it? Just because, like, when I look at Google Suite, it doesn't seem like it has the ability to have breakout rooms, and I don't know it well enough to marry myself to this, but like, it doesn't seem like it has enough breakout rooms where a teacher could be like, all right, I know as a teacher, when I have 20 kids in front of me, I know if I'm giving a 9-minute lecture when I've lost row 3. Right. I know it. Like, I see them and I'm like, they're gone and I got to get them back. You can't do, that's hard to do online. Right. Even with kids showing themselves, it's hard to do that online. Yep. So there's part of me where I'm like, how do we break that down and get them into smaller groups where we say, like, I know when I've lost you. Like, I'm here, I'm your person, and I know when I've lost you, which is why I keep coming back to these breakout rooms. And I know it sounds silly, but it's a cooperative learning kind of, this is what we're doing for the kids. How do we do that? And how do we ensure, like, I'm not losing 25% of my class on any given day?
Well, Eileen, like I think every educator understands that feeling. Like, you don't get the joy of you don't get the body language to let you know where a student is. And so it's that part's going to be a bit of a learning curve for us. One of the things that our tech department presented to us last week in an administrative meeting was really about asking the question, is the Google Suite something we want to continue, or do we want to look elsewhere? And so we are having, just so you know, we are having those discussions. Google has promised certain feature changes, some at a cost, some for free. We're trying to figure out, is Zoom a better option? So just so you know, that is a discussion that we are having internally, because some of those features that you talked about, being able to have those breakout rooms and to be able to do them quickly and effectively is going to be a huge help to staff. And so we're going to continue to explore that as the weeks come on. So I don't have that answer yet, but we will have that answer.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for asking so many questions.
That's all right.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Well, no, thank you for being here. All right. Well, listen, I'm sure there are other questions. So if I can ask this, if you have questions that you didn't get to ask tonight, please email me or email Matt. My email, jeverhart@littletonps.org. You can send those questions and I will get back to you this week with as good of information as I possibly can. And so I'm sure other things, as you discuss, will pop up. Before we go, I want to say thank you to our task force. They have really put in so much work and thought into this. You don't even know, like, the hours that we have spent talking and discussing and kicking things back and forth. Some people doing it on their own and, really diving in deep. And so I'm very appreciative of the team that we have together. And I hope as families, that the people that you see on your screen right now have worked very hard to put together plans that I think are going to be really effective come September. And so if there are things that we can do or things that we have not thought about, please reach out to any of us at any time. Thank you for being here.
Jason, the FAQs, I'm sorry to interrupt. Jason, sure. FAQs?
Oh, so we'll be putting out a frequently asked questions document this week, in addition to a survey. One of the things that we'll do after these forums, the principals will talk with district administration. We'll put together a document of frequently asked questions. So if there's something that you didn't get answered tonight, the easiest place might be to look at this document once we have it ready to go at the end of the week, and where we'll kind of keep archived those questions and answers. So if things should pop up as the days go on, you certainly can ask that. But thank you all for being here. I know in a crazy weather night in the start of August, it's a lot to think about. We've all got a lot on our minds, and we're going to make sure that we do this right. You have our promise on that. And if there's anything that you need from us, please reach out at any time.
Excellent. Great meeting.
All right.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.